Um, okay, today we're very glad and appreciate that Dr. Shih Ying Lee takes the time here to talk with us. So I'm here representing Tsinghua University Alumni Association Greater Boston, which was founded by Dr. Lee more than 40 years ago. So this association has been serving alumni and friends in the community in the Greater Boston area since 1970s, where Dr. Lee founded the association. So many of our members and friends are very interested to hear Dr. Lee's life wisdoms over all these decades, working in the Boston area, teaching and researching at MIT, founding several very successful startups and seeing this enterprise to grow over the decades, and also dedicating his time to Tsinghua University alumni in the area and all the events over the years. Thank you very much to join us here, Dr. Lee.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be able to be interviewed, and because my advanced age, I am not able to personally go to the meetings. So I'm happy to be interviewed and recorded. I hope my experience is helpful to younger members of Tsinghua alumnus. Okay, you can. I understand there's some questions that I was prepared to ask me about. I'll try my best to answer the questions.
Right, indeed. So we actually shared with all our members that Dr. Lee is willing to participate in this interview, and many of our members shared with us some common interest questions that are related to the younger generation's careers, and a lot of these Dr. Lee experienced and apparently did very well at, and would be very willing to hear the wisdom here. I think we'll start with a question going back to the 1970s when you founded the association. What was it like in the early 70s for Tsinghua alumni and this community in Greater Boston? And whether you also had annual gatherings back then that alumni meet together?
When I first come to MIT in 1942, that was during the Second World War, and at the time there were very few Tsinghua alumni, and in the Boston area. Most of them are single, so we do get together, but not very frequently. We probably meet a couple times a year, generally in a restaurant, having a dinner together. At the time there was two restaurants we often go to. One is somewhere on the Mass Avenue, and we ride a streetcar to go there. There's another one called Yang Lee, which existed for many, many years. I don't know whether it's still there or not. Anyway, those are the two places we go quite a bit. Also, later on, Professor Zhao, many of them, he's well known, Zhao Yuanren, he came back to teach at Harvard University. And they have a house on Walker Street in Cambridge, and their house becomes sort of a Chinese club because Mrs. Zhao was very hospitable, and anybody can go in there without a pre-arrangement and just drop in, and they all get welcomed by Mrs. Zhao and of course Dr. Zhao. They also have 4 lovely daughters, and the eldest one is Zhao Yuanren, or Irish Zhao, and who become very friendly with us and married one of my classmates, Bianxue Huang. The second daughter married another Tsinghua alumni, Huang Minglong, something like that. Anyway, those are early days. And at the time, later on, there were other Tsinghua people. They are not necessarily students. Many of them are Chinese officials at working for Chinese government in New York, and so they participate with us. And remember, there's one Mr. Huang, and his nickname is Huang Niu. We call him Huang Niu. He always come all the way from New York to join us, and also at the end of the meeting, we always sing the school songs. And also he was originally in the athletic department, so he was the cheerleaders, and so he led us to do xiao hu, meaning Tsinghua ra ra ra.
Yeah, I heard about that from well, one generation earlier than me, and the alumni still do that. Yeah. I think in our generation, when we were in Beijing, we didn't have that anymore. But I heard about that, exactly that. What you, yeah.
So that sort of provides the very interesting atmosphere. There was a joint meeting with the New York Tsinghua Alumni Association once, and they invited us to go to New York. Everybody go to New York, and some of them worked for the United Nations. At the time, United Nations was just set up, so we were given tours to see the United Nations building, and also one of the alumni was the owner of a Chinese restaurant, and he invited everyone go there. So that was a interesting event.
Roughly how many alumni participated in those events back then?
I would think about a dozen or so, relatively few.
Yeah, but fitting a few dozen people into a restaurant is also not a trivial thing.
A dozen or so from Boston area, and in New York, there were many more alumni of Tsinghua, and so altogether we fill up the whole dining room.
Okay, yeah, this tradition it looks like the tradition comes all the way and then still exists today. Yeah. I think here in Boston we had an annual gathering where the alumni would gather. And I know that in New York that the alumni there also gather, and in New York there's currently also one alumnus who owns a restaurant, and that becomes the canteen for the Tsinghua graduates. They call it that way in New York.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So this year, as you know, that we're trying to do the annual gathering in a somewhat different format, where we have some panel discussions followed by reception, and hopefully creates a venue so that the alumni and friends joining us on that day could have a deeper discussion and sharing their career experiences and their experiences in very different fields. So as you know, we had the theme this year. One is for startups and anything related to creating something brand new, and the other one is to share career advices and then to try to find best spots for each different individual in the different part of their career. Is there anything particular you want to talk to alumni on those two topics, because you are so experienced on both topics?
Yes, I heard about your activities, including not only that, also you have the competition of rowing longboats.
Right, dragon boats.
Yeah, dragon boats. Yeah, all those activities. I was not able to participate, but I'm really glad that your younger generation is much more active than when we were, and we were active. So I think it's a great thing, and hope you continue.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we hope we can be as physically active as you are when you I think many of us heard that you were playing tennis when you were 90 years old, and many of us wish that we can also manage to do that when we grow into that age, and that's really an achievement. Many of us are aware of your very successful career and also career both in the companies that you started, as well as in your research agenda at MIT over the years. Well, it looks so successful. It looks like very few people could actually succeed in all these different fronts. It's a very challenging thing. If you do go back, if you do have the capability to go back when you were 20 years old, 40 years old, or 60 years old, would you have made any major decision in different ways?
One's career is not predetermined. It often changes with the new opportunities which are coming along without being able to foresee. If I relive my life, I'm certain it will be different from what actually happened. I did know my strong point and weak point when I was very young. If I relive my life, I will choose jobs that I enjoy doing, even though the reward may not be the best. So to answer your question, so if I relive my lives, my whole thing probably entirely different.
So that means that back then you probably had competing interests. One of them was what you did. If you do it again, maybe you do what you did, or maybe you end up choosing something else. But both of them are something that you enjoy, and that's right. The key point.
That's right. That's the key point.
Yeah, that's very inspiring for many of us, because as you mentioned, there are just so many choices to make, and it's nice to feel like you should really try to do what you enjoy, and that usually would turn out very rewarding experience, even if the reward might be defined differently in a pragmatic sense. Yeah, many alumni are also interested in your experience starting your first company, and I think later another one. So what was the biggest obstacle when you decided to start your very first startup?
I don't think I have too much obstacles when we start a company. But once you start a company, then there's all kinds of difficulties, such as how to raise money, generally you have some starting up money, but the money would use up always most of the time before you reach a break-even point. You have the obstacle of getting sued by a much larger company. You have the problem of develop something, but you cannot find the customers or sales. That's always a problem. And in starting up, it's very easy, but continue on, it's often more difficult.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's at the annual gathering this year. We also hear a few younger generation alumni who are working in that arena to share stories about how they start up and then try to continue. And I think we'll hear a lot of things that echoing what you said. Yeah. So many of our alumni and friends now are engaged in the arena of starting startups and growing startups. So you have had several successful startups and growing those enterprises over decades. So could you tell us what was the biggest obstacle when you decided to start your very first one? And then how was it like back then?
After I graduated from MIT with a doctorate degree, I feel I don't like, initially I did not want to be in the teaching profession, and I decided to go to the industry to see what the industry was like. And so the first thing I did was to look up the Boston Globe, the section of employment, and found a company in Boston called Cram and Ferguson. It's a architecture and engineering consulting firm, and their project was to build the tallest building then in Boston called John Hancock Insurance Company. And so I thought, at the time I was a graduate from civil engineering, major in structure. So I applied and was accepted. I worked for the company for, the job I was assigned to do was supposedly design the structure of the building. And however, the job I was assigned mostly to select beams, girders, columns, and many of them just from reference books, and I found it was very tedious and not very interesting, not very inspiring. So I decided after less than a year, I decided this is not what I want to do. And so I went back to, then there's a MIT alumni placement office. I went there and I asked if there's any opportunities. Actually, not necessarily from MIT, but from whatever job opportunity they have listed. Anyway, the person in charge gave me a list. Finally, I found a position right in MIT, and it's a research lab. And at the time, right after the war, there were many government-sponsored research labs, including the laboratory which developed the radar, and there are other government-sponsored project, including the one I applied to called DACL, which stands for Dynamic Analysis and Control Lab. And there were others called servo labs. There was also computer research lab. Anyway, I applied for the, in Harvard, there was also a computer lab. And I applied for the DACL, Dynamic Analysis and Control Lab. And I found the work was much more interesting. I was assigned to do the fluid dynamics inside a control valve, and sort of a partly theoretical, partly practical research. And I spent over a year's time to finish the research. At the time, my supervisor, his name is John Blackburn, and he's a physicist, and he was very friendly with me. He said, you should publish a paper. And it never occurred to me I should write a paper, because I was new in the doing research, writing paper stuff. So he sort of guided me write a joint paper, and with my name first and his name second, and we eventually published 2 papers, both in the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, ASME, a transaction of that organization. It's a relatively prestigious place to publish things related to mechanical engineering. Anyway, after the paper was published, I got companies in the industry who do control valves to come to me to ask me to be consultants for their company. Of course, at the time, MIT, before that, after I published the paper, the head of the lab, who is a full professor of mechanical engineering department, he must appreciate my work and invited me to be on the faculty of mechanical engineering department with the title of assistant professor. I, of course, very glad to accept the title, and I was given one fluid mechanics class to teach. In addition to that, I was also doing other research work. But at that time, because the publication of the paper, I was invited to be the consultant of a couple companies. At the time, MIT was very give a lot of leeway to the faculty members. They allow the faculty members to spend 2 days a week doing their own work and consulting work or whatever other work. So at the time, one of my interests was to start from when I was younger to sort of a hand-on type. I like to use my hand to build things. So I started to sort of invent and improve a servo valve, electric actuated servo valve. And I showed the product to the company I was consulting for. They were the manufacturer of part of their product was to manufacturing control valves. And this is something different. So they were so happy to see something different. And he offered to buy out the patent rights of my invention. And I was so glad that not only my work was accepted, but also they offered to pay me a substantial amount of money, which at the time roughly about 7 times my annual salary of MIT, and I happily accepted that. By that time, my brother, Dr. Y.T. Lee, he was 4.5 years older than me, and he came to the USA early on, and returned back to China to work for the government as a engineer in a aircraft engine factory in Guizhou province.
That was in the 1950s?
That was 1930 or 40 or so. Yeah, China is fighting the Japanese, and everything moved to the inland. And Zhang Jieshi, because encouraged the Chinese Air Force to try to start a engine manufacturer by licensing from Curtiss Wright, I think, to build the engine themselves. And my brother joined that group and worked for a few years. And then after the war ended in 1945, he came back to the United States. And he was originally graduated from the Aeronautical Engineering Department of MIT. So he rejoined the MIT faculty also as an assistant professor. So at that time, we were so glad that we were together, and also happened that we both have the same interest. We were interested in innovation and starting up companies, and since we both are professors, and his research work related to internal combustion engine, and at the time they like to be able to measure the pressure under the inside the cylinder, which requires a high temperature transducer. And he designed a very ingenious water-cooled transducer so that it could measure the pressure under high temperature condition. And just so happened there is a company near in Boston, in Norwood, called Norwood Control. The company was interested in license his design and pay him a fairly good license fee too. So two of us got together. We said with the money I got from the control valves and he got from the designing the high temperature sensor, why don't we start a company? And at the time MIT was quite, as I said before, give faculty quite a bit of leeway to do their own work. Many of the faculty serve as consultants, and some of them actually start company also. So at the time, with the money we got from our special license, we used that as the seed money, and we decided to start our first company, and we called the company Dynamic Instrument Company, liking a better name. And later on, it was changed to Dynisco because the original name was has a conflict with another company called Dynamic Instrument Company. Anyway, we rented a place in the back of MIT, the East Campus, the back of the East Campus of MIT, and a space which later on the whole building was bought over by MIT, becomes now E17 or something like that. And we hired a engineer, another MIT graduate, and to be in charge of the day-to-day operation. Well, both of us basically doing design work, design R&D work only, and so we're still teaching, and also we spend a lot of time, including all the weekends, building up the DYNISCO. And the company actually, we did not require any additional funding from other places. Those days must be easy. I mean, the economical condition and the general condition must be relatively suitable for new companies.
So the products that the company that you designed for the company back then,
Yes.
That very quickly already have customers who would like to buy those products.
Correct. We did not have too much a problem. Anyway, the company quickly reached break-even point, meaning what we sell balance out what we use.
Yeah, nowadays that's very hard to come by.
Which is that's right. So we were lucky. And later on, we also find a very important application, which is to use it for plastic molding, plastic extrusion. Every extrusion machine requires a high temperature sensor, pressure sensor, to sense the melting pressure. So later on, years later, I mean, the company still exists. I look up a couple of days ago on the Google, and I found the company still called DYNISCO, and still manufactured pressure transducer for plastic extrusion application, and selling worldwide. So that's almost 50 years ago.
Wow.
And it's still operating, still sell the same product.
Oh.
So it's a pretty long product life.
Right. Yeah. That's very hard. Any of these products, the product lives are probably not over 5 years. If there's 4 years, people are already pretty happy about it.
Yes. So that's how we start up the first company. And at the time, and after a few years, we felt that we cannot neglect MIT teaching much. Everybody had to write papers and to be able to
And that
advance.
was in the 1960s, right? About 50 years from now.
Let's see. That was, yes, about that time. So we decided to sell the company and concentrate on the teaching, research at MIT. So we sort of climbed the academic ladder to be first to be associate professor, and finally full professor with tenure. And that way we go on for another 10 years or so. And somehow one day we discuss what we will be doing after we reach the then mandatory retirement age, which is 65. All the faculty has to retire. That was the rule by that time. But later on, because of the government has considered as discrimination of age, the retirement age, I don't know what is now, but sort of indefinite. But at the time, the retirement age was 65. I said, what are we going to do after we reach that age? I cannot imagine myself sitting on a chair on the beach or watch television all the time. And so we said, why don't we start another company? So that's how we started the second company.
So the company, the second company was started mainly to make sure that there's an organization that you contribute to after retirement.
Right. Make sure we have something to do when we reach the retirement age. And but the second company was much more difficult. We use the money from selling Danisco as the seeding money to start the second company. We call it Cetra system. The goal of the company is to design sensors, signal energy transduction. That was the name Cetra come from, signal energy. We figured that our original sensor work still important. Also, my work on the servo control, that's the energy part, to control energy part. So we aim to do both signal and energy transduction from one form change to another form. I had some idea of how to measure very low pressure. At Danisco, we measure general purpose pressure or very high pressure, but it's very difficult to measure very low pressure. So I thought about using variable capacitance principle to measure low pressure, and which requires some design ingenuity. So I have some idea, and I use my at the time we already built this house. We used the basement, not garage like many of new startup companies use their garage. We happened to have a nice basement when we designed the house, a very nice area which I equipped with machineries, and I personally built the prototype of a variable capacitance transducer. Okay, so we use that as a starting product and for the central system. We hired at the time, yes, we hired a student of ours, of YT's, Howie Peston, as the general manager. And because we do not have the time to do the actual day-to-day management. And what we really want to do is research, development, come up with new design. And as I said, the company was much harder going to reach a break-even point. After about 2 or 3 years, we used up the initial funding of ourselves, and at the time, the venture capital was not very popular. There's only one venture capital firm called American Research and Development Company, and that company incidentally originally funded digital equipment, which is a large company, and made out many times their investment. Anyway, we were able to, through our friends, introduce some private person who want to invest. It's not friends or person we know, but just people from Wall Street are interested in so they call it private placement, and we have a person who has a sort of a group and put some money into the company. After another couple of years, the money is still used up, and we still haven't reached the break-even point. And we do a second round looking for a fund. There was a few people join again. Of course, the stock price is lower. Finally, in about 1975, I decided that either we gave up or I resigned from MIT and concentrate on the company. So I took an early retirement from MIT and spent my full time managing the company. And after 1 year, the company broke even, and from then on, the company grew and grew very quickly. We moved from a 3,000 square feet building into a 10,000 square feet. Then we, at a point, we said we should build our own building. So my wife Lena and I was scouting around finding a good site. Finally we found a site in Acton. So we hired a engineering company, Truman Brennan. Later on they help us to design a special designed building, 100,000 square feet, 50,000 square feet. and with the possibility extending to 100,000 square feet.
What were the main customers for these sensor products?
Various, and including aircraft, automobile. One of the demonstration of the sensitivity of the transducer at a trade show was to measure a person's height. You put transducer on the floor and then put on one's head. You can measure the height. You're 5'10" or whatever, very accurately. It was very impressive to be able to be so accurate. And one of our biggest customers turned out to be a Japanese company, Sony, or one of the big semiconductor company. It's not Sony, I forget which one. And they use it in their equipment for they call stepper, and for some reason they require to measure the barometric pressure fairly accurately. But anyway, we found quite a number of users, and the company grew and grew and very quickly. Finally, we both aging, and finally I reached 84-year-old. My brother is 80. He is 4 years older. He was 89. We decided this is about it. So in 2001, 2001, we sold the company. I was 84 years old, and he was 88 years old.
And by that time, the two of you were still directly involved in the management of that company.
Yes, I was anyway. My brother was sort of part-time. He actually continued with MIT and starts innovation courses. Some of the early innovation courses were started by him. And so that's my end of my second company. And I would have to say, with all those years, I've been away from home quite a bit, and I have to thank my wife, Lena, for keeping a nice home for me to come back to, not only a good companion, but also provide a comfortable home for me to come back to, as I said. And so that was
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe this is the time we should invite Miss Ying to join you.
Yeah.
We're very glad to have Dr. Lee's wife joining him here and to share a few words with us. Maybe introduce.
我就是我的名字叫做殷怡庄。以前的时候，我记得小的时候，也是在清华园里面。那时候我们住的是叫做西南院。
西南院。
西南院。我们这次最后一次去。
You should mention your father.
我的父亲，叫做殷祖兰，他是 mechanical engineer， 他也是 MIT 毕业的。那时候很多 MIT 毕业的人都去清华教书。
那他是清华机械系的那个最早的 founding faculty members。
对，也不是 founding， 我们那时候是1936，所以那时候也在清华住过一会儿。那时候我是在清华幼稚园，清华同志小学，是不是叫同志小学？所以今天很高兴，就是跟大家说，愿你们大家都好，祝你们大家都好。
那您也是清华的校友了。那个很多校友和朋友们都特别想听听您两位能不能分享几个就是两位都特别喜欢的这个生活的智慧啊，或者对这个生命的这个建议。
Well, mutual love of each other is a basic requirement of two persons to live together happily. It is also very important for both sides to find common interests, like they both like to travel or play games or read or discuss the same books. Another thing is, in case of disagreements, always try to look from the viewpoint of the other side. I think that's very important.
对，然后最后还有很多朋友其实问到这个，我们没有在原来给，就很多人都是问那个怎么样能够保持这个身体上和心态上都非常的健康，非常的 active。因为两位我知道一直到最近几年还有的时候打球啊，前几年还开车，怎么样能够一直保持自己的身体和心理都一直保持很年轻的状态
？I think the finding a sport that you like is very important. Of course, I chose tennis very early on. We even built a tennis court when we built the house, and which gave me a lot of enjoyment. Younger days, we invite friends come over to play, and even after dark, we have light up the court. We can play in the evenings. So later on, I joined tennis club nearby here, and they select partners for you. So anytime I feel like, I'll go there and play. As you say, I was able to play until I was almost 90 years old. And I think that's a key to keep active. And I wish everybody can find something like that to keep active.
Okay, yeah. We actually have some of these alumni clubs that's organized around particular physical hobbies, like the long distance running and jogging is now a popular theme, and many alumni here participate in this exercise, and a few of them are even qualified to participate in Boston Marathon.
Very good.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions we have. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for talking to us, and I'm sure that many of our alumni and friends will find this very inspiring and also very educational for particular topics. And at our events, we always try to create a venue for participants to really have deeper exchange. And although this time you couldn't join us at the venue on the 15th of April, and we appreciate that you take the time to talk to us and then to really start these conversations for these events. Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure it's my pleasure to be able to participate without having to go there, because I do have limitation in travel or walking, physical limitation. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody. I hope my experience benefit some of you.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.